Well, it's Monday morning in Retarddanistan, and as per usual, retarded nonsense is happening in the Republic. But before we get on to the usual news stories of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help. If you'd like to support the work that I do here, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. The link is in the description box below. So let's get on to the main news articles. And to be honest, a lot of the news articles are actually the chickens coming home to roost for the ANC, with ANC failures in terms of policy failures, all leading to, well, the same road now. The outcomes of these all seem to be very obvious, specifically in relation to South Africa's relationship with the United States. So let's get on to the first news article. And this is the news article that the SANDF has formally requested China to postpone the scheduled November naval exercise as part of their BRICS military coordination. Now, if you recall, they were going to have a naval exercise in the Western Cape. And this was all going to be part of a China, Russia, South Africa BRICS military coordination. But there was a caveat, and that was it was going to occur around the time of the G20 summit, which is November 22nd to November 23rd. And everybody looked at this and thought, well, that's really stupid because, well, the G20 has a number of countries that aren't exactly friendly to, well, China or Russia. As an example, the United States. And many individuals said, well, this was really provocative. Why would you do that at a time when you thought to yourself, well, trade relations with many of the Western countries, well, they're a little bit fraught. So maybe we should be a little bit more gentle in our approach. No, not South Africa. Now, this postponement comes amid heightened global scrutiny on South Africa's ties with Russia and China, especially from the US. So we know now that Donald Trump isn't going to be attending the G20. Instead, he's sending his vice president. And that in itself was a retaliation to what he says are bad things happening in South Africa. Yet an example of that was this exercise. Now, moving on to the next news story, and this is the news story that Cyril Ramaphosa has come under fire for likening South Africa's land policy to, well, Zimbabwe's. You know, there's actually a fear in South Africa around land expropriation without compensation, and that is look north, look to Zimbabwe, and see what they did in terms of the land grabs and how that, well, decimated the country. That's always been the fear. And if you ever speak to anybody about what do they think the future of South Africa could be if the ANC had its way, it's always, well, look north to Zimbabwe. And we all know this to be true. So when Cyril Ramaphosa says these stupid things, well, they kind of feed into the fear that many individuals naturally have. Now, this statement was made during a visit to Zimbabwe's agricultural show in Harare on the 29th of August, 2025. Where Ramaphosa describes Zimbabwe's land program, which, as you know, was marked by controversial seizures of property in the early 2000s, well, he described it as essential and ambitious and a form of redress for historical injustices. Now, if those words don't ring alarm bells to you, well, they should, because it's the type of rhetoric that the ANC uses, well, quite a lot. Now, his remarks have sparked sharp backlash, noticeably from the DA, which denounced them as praising Zimbabwe's policies, but forgets to notice that they devastated Zimbabwe's economy, foreign relations, and food security, because, as per usual, the ANC's ideology is far more important than the consequences of what that ideology leads to. But you know, it's very important to note that even the city press is starting to call Ramaphosa's statements and I quote, a stupid, unforced error, where he criticized Ramaphosa for inadvertently giving fuel to fears amongst investors and political detractors. Because you see, as I said, everybody looks north and goes, well, that's what our future could be, and that's the worst case scenario. And so even the legacy media is starting to say, Ramaphosa's a retard. Like, why would you say this stuff? And it was very interesting because, as I said myself, and it's what the City Press columnist has noted, I don't actually think this was Ramaphosa praising Zimbabwe. I actually think it was a speechwriter who was at an agricultural show and wanted to say something positive, and so he just put some buzzwords on a page of like, wow, this is great, even though it's not. And what it actually shows you is that the ANC even has retards writing its speeches. They are not clever individuals. Now, talking of Ramaphosa doing really retarded nonsense, well, you will recall the news story of the general. Remember the general that went to Iran and said that South Africa should do more with Iran, and he praised our relationship with them? Well, if you recall, that general, when he came back, had to meet with Cyril Ramaphosa in order to explain himself. And he has now explained himself. He's come under scrutiny over his comments, and he met with the president in order to explain himself, and now he has been officially exonerated of any wrongdoings. I don't understand this at all. So his clearance is viewed as a strategic move to maintain stability and continuity in the SANDF's leadership amidst ongoing external scrutiny. Scrutiny, obviously, from people like us, who's looking at it going, well, yeah, but this is daft. Like, the guy's doing things on his own. He's making the country look like a proper moron. And as a result, well, it's really problematic when it comes through to relations with foreign countries, like the US. So why did you allow him to do this? Now, you will recall Cyril's immediate reaction to that was, well, I didn't authorize him to do it. And Durka even came out and said, the general's not authorized to comment on foreign policy. That's our job. And now he's gone to explain himself to the president, because remember, this was a grave embarrassment, and the president said, oh, it's fine. And this has been done to maintain stability. So effectively, if you read between the lines, you're saying you don't want to chastise the general in case you have a coup? Is that what you're saying? And continuity in the leadership? Yeah, I don't understand that either, because this guy's due to retire like in 4 months. Or is it you don't want to take his pension off him because he's got 4 months left to serve and he might cause a coup? Like, what are we trying to say here? SANDF couldn't cause a coup if they tried. They've got no bloody ammo. The army's a joke. Most of these guys can't even climb on the back of a truck. They're too fat. So what's actually really going on here? Well, you can let me know what you think in the comment section below. For me personally, I think it's just Cyril's usual lack of accountability for, well, anyone. Now, it should then come as no surprise that, moving on to the next news article, a Ipsos poll has shown that 80% of South Africa says that the country's on the wrong track. Now, Ipsos says in the What Worries the World study that it shows that 8 in 10 South Africans believe that the country's heading in the wrong direction, a pessimism level which was last met just before the 2024 elections. So despite early optimism following the formation of the GNU, well, that's not really now lasting. It's actually going down rather fast. And a lot of this is, remember that the last time it was at this level was prior to the elections, so people were getting depressed at ANC policy, and a lot of people are feeling depressed because the GNU hasn't actually dissuaded ANC policy. The ANC still marches on, even though they're now a minority party. And Ipsos noted that the sentiment is a real-time gauge of the nation's emotional and political state, revealing a sharp disillusionment with current leadership and policies. As I said, everybody's looking at this saying, why is the ANC still able to roughshod themselves all over the country when they're a minority party? And I'm looking at all the GNU parties and really asking this question. But in any case, the ANC says that it acknowledges its failures, but says that poverty and inequality are a political catastrophe. And in a discussion document revealed ahead of its National General Council, the ANC admitted that their inability to address deepening poverty and inequality represents not just a socio-economic crisis, but a political catastrophe for the party. Now, this candid admission signals heightened internal pressure on the party as they brace for the upcoming elections, and it reflects growing public dissatisfaction because everybody knows that, well, everybody blames the ANC for everything that's gone on, and this is because the ANC has self-enriched. They have not enriched the general republic, and everybody knows this to be true. Now, the party itself also knows that we know that they stole the country and they destroyed it. So they feel a little bit embarrassed by this. Now, in response, Naledi Pandor, Islamist, now head of Mandela Foundation, Pandor, says that South Africa actually needs to stop waiting on the West to rescue it. Instead, she urged African nations to stop relying on Western aid, instead work towards seizing their own destiny. And she says that this is amidst a shifting global order. She also says that South Africa should make good trouble. What exactly is making good trouble to Islamist Pandor? I don't know. More siding with Palestine and Iran, maybe? I mean, we have no trade with them, and what we really need to do is have trade with countries and prompt jobs, but I don't know. I mean, as we know, for many of these individuals, well, trade and jobs means nothing. Ideology means everything. In any case, she says that we should make our own destiny. But you see, the reason she's saying this is because, ladies and gentlemen, this woman's putting her hat into the ring for the leadership contest. She's trying to take over from Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, news had been that Patrice Motsepe was going to attempt to take over, and that he was the front runner, if you want, for the ANC. But he said at the weekend that he's not actually putting his hat in the ring for that position. So one has to ask the question, are we looking at a Pandor presidency? I mean, that would be disastrous. I mean, I don't know what to say to that. In any case, the South African trade tariffs with the United States, well, they're still in place. As you know, South Africa got the 30% trade tariffs imposed on it, and these took effect on the 8th of August 2025. And so far, they're jeopardizing an estimated 30,000 jobs, particularly in the automotive and the agricultural sector, with unemployment rising to nearly 33% and youth unemployment even higher. We all know this to be true. We know this to be standard. But what you don't know is that business confidence also fell to 39 points in the third quarter of 2025. And this is below the 42-point long-term average. So basically, business confidence is at all-time low, which is underlying growing concerns across the private sector that, well, South Africa is not a high business or growth destination or even an investment destination. Now, as you know, the South African government launched their whole export support desk and proposed economic relief. And the main idea behind this was to export to emerging new markets. But as per usual, well, I didn't actually expect that this would go very well, and well, it hasn't. So many experts remain skeptical about the entire palaver. What we really need to do is to remedy the relationships with the United States, and I suppose we could say that we are taking steps to do that. Because this brings us on to the final news article, and this is the news article that MTN, remember South Africa's big success story, MTN, and you will recall that they have this whole asset deal with Iran that's now subject to possible US sanctions, which could also lead to South Africa losing its SWIFT assets and so forth. Well, the MTN's minority stake in Iran's Iran cell has effectively become a frozen asset, with the US sanctions blocking any asset transfer or disinvestment. So that's a very complicated way of saying that they have this stake there, but the stake really means nothing because they can't actually access it and they can't actually do anything with it because of, well, US sanctions. Now, the CEO has described this investment as, well, liquidity dead end, which basically means that they put money there, they bought something, and they can't really do anything. Now, despite MTN no longer operating in Afghanistan, they're now going to seek to exit Iran and their Iranian operations. So they're saying that this liquid dead-end type investment, they're going to get rid of it. Now, what they're not saying is that the reason they're going to get rid of it is because if they don't, they're going to be under increased scrutiny from the US, and that scrutiny could be really disastrous for the firm. So what actually it looks like is that the firm's trying to get rid of this frozen asset as quick as possible because they don't really want the spotlight on them any further than they already have. So it does look like, yet again, we're seeing the ANC and the ANC's policies, even in the private sector, because MTN's effectively a ANC front. As you know, there's many ANC stooges in senior positions in, well, MTN. So as a result of that, well, it does look like they're trying to get rid of it, just like they're trying to postpone the naval exercises with the SANDF, because ultimately the ANC needs its trade relationship with the US. As we've seen, most of the country don't actually agree that the country is going in a good direction. And jobs are a really key aspect of that. And to be frank, the ANC understands that come the next elections, they're going to be a political minority party. Like by miles, they're going to be a rounding error because people don't have faith in the ANC anymore. Because the ANC are now actively destroying people's qualities of life, not improving it. They're at that point now where they're actually unable to improve people's quality of life because of all the policies that they put in place. So as a result, the ANC perhaps are starting to, change tact. But that's theoretical at this point in time, and you can let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. In any case, that's the news of today. Until tomorrow, bye.